What is up, YouTube? Today I'm coming back at you with another video, and today's video is going to be something that I've wanted to do for a while. I just haven't because I didn't want to have to, get these movies off the shelf and, put them all together. And also it's kind of a touchy subject because everybody likes different movies. But today I wanted to give you my top 5 favorite movies of all time. Now, these are just my opinions. By no means do I think that my movies are better than your movies. Everyone's entitled to enjoy whatever movies they want. But these are just the 5 movies that I enjoy the most, and these are my favorite movies that I've ever watched, and I think they're the best movies that I've ever seen. Now, before we get into that, I just want to touch on some of the things that I think about while picking my favorite movies, because some people just like to pick the movies that they just enjoyed watching the most, which is perfectly fine, and I guess sort of same thing kind of goes for me, but I kind of go into different subsections as well. I like to think about the acting. How well did the main characters act in it? Were they believable? Did their performance really, hit every note that they were supposed to? I like to think about the story. How engrossing is the story? How believable is it? How well do they world build in that story and stuff like that? I like to think about the cinematography, how each shot is done, what kind of look are they going for, how well does it, accomplish that, and that sort of also ties into special effects. If the movie uses special effects, how good are those special effects? Are they noticeable compared to the real life action shots? And the most important for me, which is I know a surprising thing, a lot of people will have the story being the most important thing, but I really think the most important thing in any movie that I watch is the soundtrack. Now, there are tons of movies that I've watched that are fantastic movies, but the soundtrack wasn't that great, and none of those movies are my top 5. All of the movies that I'm going to show you have an amazing soundtrack that fits the mood and the tone of the movie very well, and it transitions in each scene very well, and it just helps you to get engrossed in the movie and really captures the movie and makes you forget that you're actually watching a movie, which is something that I think is a big accomplishment and one of the things that I really look for when I'm looking at a soundtrack in my favorite movies. So all of the movies that I'm going to show you have great soundtracks, and I'm also going to do some honorable mentions. They are also movies that I recommend highly, and I love those movies. It's just they don't really hit all the marks that these top 5 do. So yeah, let's just get right into it. So we'll go from 5 to 1, and then we'll do, right before we get to number 1, we'll do some honorable mentions. So that starts us off with my number 5. So what is my number 5 favorite movie of all time? I would have to say that my number 5 favorite movie of all time is probably going to be Arrival. I loved this movie when I saw it in theaters. So I went into this movie, I saw it in theaters, and I didn't know anything about the movie at all. All I know is that it was a sci-fi movie, and I was like, okay, it's a new sci-fi movie, I like sci-fi movies, and so I went and saw it in theaters. Man, was I blown away. Not only was it exactly the kind of movie that I love, but it was great special effects, amazing acting from the actors, and the soundtrack, while sparse, really fit the movie very well. All the scenes in this movie are, a masterpiece. I love the way that they did the story in this movie. It's not a linear story like most movies. If you've ever seen Memento, it's a very similar style to that, where you don't exactly get the events in chronological order. It's actually split up in multiple parts, which is really cool. I love when movies do that because it kind of keeps you thinking, and I love when movies make you think about stuff. So it's really cool. I also liked the aspect of this where the aliens are sort of pacifistic and are just more there to share their knowledge, which was really cool. And this movie is so great, and it's such an interesting ride. It's not an action movie, and it's not really like your typical alien movie. It's very cool, very relaxed. It's very, it takes you on a roller coaster for sure, but there's a lot more thought that goes into it than just, a big action alien blockbuster such as Independence Day Resurgence, for example, which is not a bad movie. It's more action and explosions, and it's got a lot more thought gone into the story in this one, and I think it presents some interesting concepts in this movie, which is really, really cool. So, what is my number 4? So, my number 4 is one that I watched probably about a year ago now, and I really liked it. And I never actually thought about watching this movie. I saw it when it came. I didn't see this one in theaters, surprisingly. I saw it at the video store, and I always saw the cover. And I'm like, I really like the main actor, but I never was that interested in the movie. And then we decided to rent it one day, and after we rented it, literally the next day I went out and bought this movie. So, what is my number 4? Her. I love this movie. It is so good. It is so, so good. If you like emotional roller coaster movies that really take you on a ride of emotions, this is going to be a good one for you. It's so good. If you like sci-fi, this is also a sci-fi movie. A lot of my movies that I like and enjoy are sci-fi movies. So you're going to see a lot of sci-fi. But this is more of a not spaceshipy sci-fi movie. It's more of a near-future sci-fi where you still have cars and stuff, but obviously technology has advanced a little bit. And I don't want to spoil too much about this movie, but the acting is amazing. This actor, I can never pronounce his name correctly. I don't even know. Everybody I talk to pronounces his name differently, so I'm not even going to say his name. But he's one of my favorite actors of all time, and he is so good. Any movie I've ever seen him in, he really, really stands out in his acting performance, and he really pulls off a believable character in every performance he's done, and that I've seen at least. And he's such a good actor, and it really carries this film. Also, Scarlett Johansson, props to her. She does an amazing job in this movie, just as a voice actor. She is so good in this movie. And the effects, there's some effects, but not many. And the cinematography is fantastic. The soundtrack, oh my gosh, the soundtrack in this movie, it really, really hits every emotion that you're supposed to be feeling, and it really helps you feel what the main character is feeling at every step of the way. And it's just a fantastic movie. Great one to check out. Oh man, I love that movie. Alright, so now we're getting into my top 3, and these ones are actually, these are older than, well, some of these are older than the other two, but yeah, these 3 are movies that I try to show anybody that hasn't seen them. Those other 2, I can see they have sort of a niche audience and might not be for everybody, but these 3, I try to show to everybody that I know. If they haven't seen any of my top 3, I'm going to probably try to push them to watch it. So, let's get into it. So, my number 3 is oh my gosh, this movie. It's so good, and I've never seen a movie that covers this topic like this does. And it is The Prestige. And I also have all my top 3 in Steelbook, by the way. So, The Prestige. This is a movie about magicians. And there are other movies about magicians out there, such as The Illusionist, which it's an alright movie. But The Prestige is just like on another level. And we also get into, this movie is directed by my favorite director. And you'll see one other movie in my top 3 is by him. My favorite director of all time is Christopher Nolan. He is fantastic. He's such a good director. And his cinematography and the way he shoots movies is just, it's so good. Every movie that I've ever seen from him, I have enjoyed the way it's shot. Now, my least favorite movies from him are the Batman movies, but I will say that they are shot very well, and I feel like the soundtracks are decent in those. I'm just not a huge fan of, I don't know, I'm just not a huge fan of those Batmans. Maybe it's just nostalgia and the old 1989 Batman, but I'm a huge fan of Christopher Nolan, and The Prestige is a fantastic movie. It's Christian Bale and Hugh Jackman, and they are just so good in this movie. They are both so good. And the story that this movie tells is so interesting, and it keeps you on your toes, and it keeps you wondering what's going to happen next and how the plot's going to progress. And since it's a movie about magicians, you're always trying to look for those little hidden things and how did they do this, or trying to guess how they did this, or something like that. And it's really good. Also, soundtrack, very good. Not as strong of a soundtrack, not strong, it's the word I would use. It's not as prominent as a soundtrack as the other two that I've shown so far. The soundtrack sort of takes a backseat in this, where it does a really good job of getting you in the mood and, playing to what the cinematography is showing you. But this movie is much more about what you see and seeing the story unfold visually. Whereas a lot of the times in the rest of my movies that I have, the soundtrack also plays a major part in, making you feel a certain way. The soundtrack in this is more just helping you set ambience, which is something a little bit different than my top movies, I would say. So, very great movie, amazing, special effects, and, I really love a lot of stuff about this movie, and it's just really hard to put it into words without spoiling it, because this movie has a ton of spoilers that could be spoiled for you, so fantastic movie. Highly recommend it. Alright, now we'll get on to my number 2, and this one is kind of different than the others, because I actually saw a trailer for this before it came out, browsing on YouTube one day. I just saw a trailer and I was like, the first instance that I saw that trailer, I got goosebumps. I knew it was going to be an amazing movie. I knew I had to see this movie in theaters the first day it came out. And it was like, to be completely honest with you, when I saw this trailer, I was as hyped as I was before The Force Awakens came out. It really was. I remember telling my girlfriend that we have to see this movie. We are going to go see this movie when it comes out. And that I need to see this movie. It looked amazing. The way it was shot from the trailers, even the temporary soundtrack, because they didn't actually have a soundtrack recorded from the trailer that I saw. They were using the V for Vendetta soundtrack, and that soundtrack fit so well into what they showed visually. And then I knew that I had to see this movie. And just the smallest bit of story that they gave you from the trailer was enough to really pique my interest, and that is Interstellar. Another Christopher Nolan film, and this movie really changed a lot of perspectives that I had about Matthew McConaughey to start. So before seeing Interstellar, I just thought Matthew McConaughey he was a decent actor, but he did a lot of romantic comedies, and he was kind of one of those, romantic comedy or heavy romance actors. Man, seeing him in Interstellar blew me away. He did so well in this movie. It is phenomenal. One of the best performances I've ever seen. And I am so pleased that they chose him, because he did such a great job. The soundtrack. Oh my god. Hans Zimmer, my favorite composer for movies. He did an amazing job in this movie. The theme, everything about the music in this movie really brought out all the story tones and everything, all the emotion. Everything was spot on. They did an amazing job with the soundtrack in this movie, and it complements the visuals so well. And the way this movie was shot was fantastic. I loved this movie. The transitions from the IMAX scenes that were huge and wide, and you see these vast space landscapes, to the very intimate shots with the characters. They do such a great job of utilizing the tools that they had, and the story is fantastic. It's a space movie about. I'll give you the basic premise because this won't spoil too much. It's a space movie about humanity trying to leave Earth because of basically a blight that's going across and destroying the resources. And so that's what the movie's about, them trying to find a suitable planet to live on. And it's such an interesting premise, and they do it in such a believable way, and all of the things that happen in this movie seem so believable, and they just, it seems so well acted, and it's such a good movie. And the twist at the end, really, wow, that hit me so hard at the beginning, at the end of the movie. I was just, I don't know, I was so engrossed in this movie that normally when I look at movies, I'm always trying to guess what happens next a lot of the time. It's something that I kind of do whenever I watch anything, a TV show or a movie. I always am trying to guess what's going to happen next. I was so caught up in watching this movie and just enjoying my experience that I wasn't even thinking about anything. I was just enjoying the ride, and that twist at the end was just, it was so good. It was so good. It was a great experience. I'm so happy I saw this in theaters. Watching this in theaters was probably one of the most satisfying experiences I've ever had going to the movies. And fantastic movie. Highly recommend it. Alright, and now we're going to be on to my number one. But before we get to my number one, I want to talk a little bit about some honorable mentions and some movies that I think are definitely worth checking out. Didn't make my top 5, but are definitely really great movies that I highly recommend anybody watch. Alright, so number one, well, the first, not really number one, they're in no particular order. The first honorable mention that I will talk about is The Shawshank Redemption. If you've never seen this movie, it's a classic movie. I mean, it's probably one of the best performances from Morgan Freeman I've ever seen. The soundtrack in this movie is fantastic. Such a great soundtrack and such an interesting story. Obviously, this one's based off a book, but it's so good. It does such a great job of portraying probably what the book was trying to portray, and the way that this movie was shot, and just the actors and the narration always comes out at a perfect time, and it's such a great and well shot movie and well thought out that anybody who hasn't seen this movie and likes this is not an action movie by any means. It's definitely a more slow paced movie, not very high adrenaline. This is a lot of talking. So if you're a fan of those types of movies, definitely check this one out. This is highly recommended. And fun fact, I've actually seen the prison that this was shot in real life, and it's surreal to see it in real life nonetheless, because this was shot in my home state. So seeing it in real life is just, it's kind of bizarre. It's definitely not as big as it makes it seem in the movie, but it looks really creepy in real life. So definitely interesting. Really good one to check out. Alright, so the next one that I want to talk about is one that I actually don't have. It's another Christopher Nolan movie. It's Memento. Now, I love Memento, and I would totally own it. I actually don't own that movie. The reason why I don't own it is I refuse to buy it in anything less than Blu-ray. And it is really, really hard to find Memento in Blu-ray. So I am currently looking for it, and hopefully going to try to get it for a good price. So, Memento is a fantastic movie about a guy who, his wife was killed, and then he gets a severe brain injury during the attack that killed his wife, and has short-term memory loss. So it's about him trying to solve his wife's murder while having short-term memory loss. So it's a very interesting movie, and it's a movie that I really enjoy, and it was actually recommended to me back in high school by one of my English teachers. I wrote a journal about some of my favorite movies at that time, and he recommended that I watch Memento. And it is one of the greatest movies that I've seen, so definitely worth checking out. I wish I could show you some cover art or something for it, but I don't own that one because it's really hard to find on Blu-ray, and surprisingly just hard to find in general. I don't know why. Because Christopher Nolan's a really popular director, and even in the Christopher Nolan director box set, they do not include Memento for some reason, so I find that interesting. Maybe it's a rights issue or something, I have no idea. Alright, so the next movie I have here is one that is a movie that used to be my favorite movie of all time back when I was a lot younger, but it's still one of my favorite movies, and I still really appreciate the movie, and I think every time you watch this movie, you pick up on new things, which is great. And that is Donnie Darko. It's a great movie. It's Another movie that it's a movie that talks about time travel and alternate like possibilities, and you know, it covers a lot of interesting and weird subjects, and it's a very weirdly shot movie. The soundtrack for this one plays really well into it. It doesn't use a lot of stuff made specifically for this movie. It uses a few songs here and there that were specifically made for this movie, but it also uses a lot of 80s songs that really tie in well with the time period that this movie takes place in. So that's a little bit different. But Jake Gyllenhaal does a great job in this movie, and just the twists in there in this movie are really great, and some of the antagonist is really great, which I would consider the antagonist to be Frank in this movie, and I think he does a really great job. I think the actor who does Frank does a really great job in this movie as well. And just, you know, the visuals of this movie are really what hit home, and or like the biggest strong point for this movie are the visuals. If you watch this movie, especially if you get this Blu-ray right here, don't watch the director's cut. The director's cut just redoes all the special effects and changes the voice of Frank, which was probably the worst mistake ever. Just watch the original theatrical cut. It's great. Just watch the theatrical cut. It's a fantastic cut. So most of the time, from what I've seen, when you get Donnie Darko, you'll get both cuts on the disc. So highly recommend checking out the theatrical cut of Donnie Darko. The next movie that I have here is another Christopher Nolan movie. I'm sorry, he's my favorite director. I really enjoy pretty much everything he's put out. This one's very recent, and I saw this one in theaters by myself. I went on a Monday, on senior day, so I was there with a bunch of older people. And I watched this one by myself just because it's Christopher Nolan. At this point, when this movie came out, I knew Christopher Nolan was my favorite movie, and I had decided anything Christopher Nolan puts out, I'm going to go see in theaters. And so Christopher Nolan had announced his new movie, Dunkirk, and so I was like, I have to see it. I have to go and see it. I have to see what he does. And I'm so happy I did. This is a very unique movie experience. It's something like I've not seen before. There's very, very little dialogue in this movie, and it's very visual, and it relies heavily on the visuals and the soundtrack. Another Hans Zimmer in this one. So Hans Zimmer does the soundtrack for this, and I think he does a great job of doing the soundtrack for this as well. Really plays into the drama and the tension that you feel in the scenes. All the actors in this movie do a really great job. Although there's very little dialogue, it's a lot of physical acting, and I think that all of the physical acting is very well done and very believable. And just, it manages to portray not just one story in this movie, but like 3 separate stories that all kind of come together at the end that really make it stand out as a great storytelling movie and offer a different story experience for a World War II movie than you normally see, which is something that I really appreciate, because having seen a lot of World War II movies, they kind of start to get stale after a while, but this offers a nice, fresh new take on the World War II genre, and is a great movie, and I highly recommend it. So definitely recommend watching Dunkirk. It's a fantastic movie. And the last honorable mention that I have here is a little bit different. I don't have any other movies by this director, I don't think. Let me see who directed it. I don't even know who directed this movie. Yeah, okay, so Edward Zwick. I've never seen any other movies by him. And I don't have any other actors from this movie. Actually, I do have one actor from another movie in here, but regardless. Blood Diamond. I really, really like this movie. It tells a really, really great story, and it's action-packed. It has a alright soundtrack. The soundtrack's not as strong in this one, but the visual style and the acting and the cinematography are all top-notch in this movie. I really enjoy Leonardo DiCaprio's performance in this, which is really kind of sad to me because I'm a big fan of a lot of Leonardo DiCaprio's work. I think he's a great actor, and I feel like he should have won Best Actor for this film, not Revenant. I really liked Revenant. Was a good movie and an interesting experience, but I don't think it was his best performance, which is odd because I think this was a much better performance from Leonardo DiCaprio than Revenant. that's just my personal opinion. Not to say Revenant's a bad movie, but I think this is a better movie. So, it's a great, great movie. Really, really, interesting story. Offers some unique perspectives on certain things, and it's just, it's a good action movie, and it also keeps you interested with like a more in-depth story, which is something I really appreciate, because I do, although it doesn't really look it from my movies that I've picked, I do appreciate action movies. I do watch a lot of action movies as well. So, Blood Diamonds, very great movie, and I highly recommend it. All right, so let's get on to my number one favorite movie of all time. What is my favorite movie? I've had this as my favorite movie for quite a while now, and I urge anyone to watch this movie, and that is Gladiator. This is a Ridley Scott movie. It's got Russell Crowe in it, Joaquin Phoenix. I'm not even sure if that's how you pronounce his name, but that's how I'm going to pronounce it, because I'm horrible at pronouncing names. And they provide some of the best acting that I've ever seen. Specifically Joaquin Phoenix, whatever you pronounce it, fantastic in this movie. Probably the outstanding performance in this movie is his performance as Commodus. Such a great performance, and so intimidating and dark and believable, and it's so good, so well done. Russell Crowe, also great performance, and does a fantastic job of playing his role. Great cinematography, the visuals, the way that this was shot, amazing. The soundtrack, Hans Zimmer again. This is, in my opinion, Hans Zimmer's best work. It's on another level. It is so great, and so, it stands out so much. It's so good, and it meshes so well with the fantastic visuals. That scene where Commodus and Maximus are coming from the floor of the stadium with the rose petals falling on them and the drums playing and the soundtrack in the background. That is such a great scene. Just the visuals, the soundtrack, and the mood. Everything about this movie is in my opinion a masterpiece. This is probably the closest thing to perfect I've ever seen in a movie. It is. I could watch this forever. I've seen this movie so many times, it's kind of ridiculous. I don't even know how many times I've seen it. I've just seen it so many times. I've been watching this movie ever since probably in middle school. I watched it on VHS. I've watched it on DVD. I have it on Blu-ray, and I'll probably eventually watch it on 4K. This is my favorite movie, obviously, but I urge anyone who is a fan of historical drama movies to watch this movie. Or if you're just a fan of good movies with good soundtracks and good visuals, definitely check this movie out. I also really want to talk about something else. I'll do a quick cut because I'm running out of time on my memory card, so I'll do a quick cut. Alright, so now that we're done with that quick cut, I want to talk about one thing that I'm really sad about. Why are there no more good historical drama movies or historical fiction movies? And if you don't know what I'm talking about, I'm talking Gladiator, Braveheart, Kingdom of Heaven, Last Samurai, Troy, even though Troy's probably the weakest of that bunch. Those movies are fantastic. I love that genre of movie. That subgenre of movie is so good. I love all of those movies that I mentioned. Even Troy. I have the Elite... I'll pull it out right here. I've got the Elite Collector's Box of Troy. You see this? This is ridiculous. And this is for a movie that's not even my favorite movie. I just love this genre so much that I had to get that. Man, I am such a big fan of that genre, and we get so few movies in that genre that it's kind of upsetting, because in my opinion, this genre was ruined, I'm sorry, by 300. Now, don't get me wrong, I enjoyed 300, and I thought it was a cool, unique, different take, but after 300 came out, and that was super successful, every other historical drama movie since has been shot the exact same way. Look at War of the Immortals. Look at the new Clash of the Titans. The over-reliance on CGI and bloom effects and this weird gold dark tone that is on all of the new historical drama movies and the new Hercules movies. Man, what is up with that? Like, that is not something that I want to see. It was okay in 300 as a one-off thing because it's obviously about Greek mythology, and I get why they did it with 300 because Greek mythology, you know, you think Greek, you think gold statues or statues or higher-than-life tales, and you're like, yeah, okay, I can see it. And then you got War of the Immortals, okay, yeah, it's a little derivative, but you know, I can see why they used it there again. But then you got other movies, like, I can't even think of them all off the top of my head. There's just so many that have been coming out that have that same visual style, and they seem so unoriginal. There's never a good soundtrack to any of those either, which is a huge disappointment. And I would love to see more movies do the mythology perspective that Troy did. They tried to make Troy historically accurate from a historical perspective, and I appreciated that. And I really appreciate the use of real-life extras in Braveheart, or Kingdom of Heaven, or Troy. And the fight choreography is not like 60 billion jump cuts. There's actual linear fights where you actually see the actors having to act. And I don't know, I feel it's really frustrating because it's one of my favorite genres, and especially with Gladiator, you see the best of that genre. And I feel like it's really a lost art. You still do see some stuff, like I'll give you an example of some stuff that does it well as a modern movie. You don't see it quite as often anymore, and you definitely don't see it as blockbusters. The blockbusters are the biggest offenders of this, where they don't live up to previous movies. They're basically all derivatives of 300 in my opinion. I know that's controversial, whatever. But a lot of the smaller titles, such as Black Death, I think Black Death does a great job of doing something supernatural-esque and mythology-esque in the style that I think fits that genre best. And, I mean, what can be said? And I even think that the new Hobbit movies kind of suffer from this a bit as well. If you look at the original Lord of the Rings trilogy, they still did that more realistic special effects with a lot more real-life extras and less reliance on CGI. But then, after 300, and after that, this new wave of historical drama that has been relying on CGI, you see that even in the new Hobbit movies, and that's one of the reasons why I really don't like the Hobbit movies. It's just not visually pleasing to watch. And it's got a decent story. The story's definitely not as strong as Lord of the Rings. And the soundtrack's good, but the visuals are just so off-putting. And my biggest problem is, regardless of how good you think they look now, these special effects will age poorly. I guarantee you, you're going to look back on The Hobbit and be like, or you're going to go look back at 300 and be like, Whereas using real-life extras and a lot less CGI and more prosthetic and practical effects, that will hold up a lot better. Go and look back at older TV shows such as Star Trek, the original Star Trek series. Yeah, they were very primitive prosthetics and practical effects, but they have a charm and they still hold up really well in my opinion. So yeah, I guess that's the end of my rant. I'm sorry I got into a rant there, but I really had to say that because it's so frustrating seeing one of my favorite genres just divulge into this, I don't know, this constant churn of the same thing, and it's kind of frustrating. So yeah, those are my favorite movies of all time. Let me know in the comment box below what you think of my favorite movies. What are your favorite movies of all time? I'm incredibly interested to hear about them because I try to watch every movie recommendation that you guys leave in the comments, and I pretty much have. So if you guys want to talk about any of my favorite movies or you want to recommend a movie, definitely let me know. I try to respond to all my comments, and I do a pretty good job of it. So thank you guys for watching. I hope you guys enjoyed this video, and I'll see you guys next time. Peace.